Joining us right now is Congressman Khanna, whose district sits in the heart of Silicon Valley. Congressman, welcome. Thank you for being with us this morning. We've been talking about the losses that have been felt in the stock market over the last 3 days. Obviously, we're looking quite a bit better today. But for companies in your district, it's been severe. Apple, for one, has lost 19% over the last 3 trading sessions. That's a decline of about $638 billion because of these tariffs. What are you hearing from your constituents? What are you thinking about these things?
Well, I'm hearing that these are some of the most self-destructive, wealth-destroying policies that any modern president has had. Look, a lot of people in my district who voted for Trump don't understand what he's doing. Some of the reason they voted for him is they thought they would be able to do more mergers, they'd be able to IPO, and all of that has been put on hold. But it's not, as you know, just hurting the tech companies. I mean, this is hurting manufacturers, it's hurting small businesses. It across the board has hurt the country without actually incentivizing new manufacturing to come here.
Do you get the sense that these are permanent tariffs, or do you think that this is a negotiation to try and get a better deal for America with all of these other countries?
The truth is, I don't know, and no one in the country knows, and that's part of the problem. If you're Mary Barra, are you going to go to your board and say, let me build new factories here, or are you going to think, well, Trump himself is saying that this may change in 2 months. His Secretary of Treasury is saying it may change by June. And then the problem is, even if they fix this, even if they take away the blanket tariffs, how confident are you going to be that they don't wake up in September and impose them again? And so there is permanent damage done because he has shaken the confidence and trust of the business community. By the way, many of them who gave him the benefit of the doubt. I campaigned for Kamala Harris. Many have voted for Trump, and now they're shaken.
That's something we heard from Tom Lee this morning, just this idea of shaking confidence. What would it take to change people's minds? I mean, I think especially if the concern is that business leaders are not going to move forward with plans, they're not going to spend capital or commit capital, they may not be hiring as a result. What does it take to get them a little more confident to try and prevent a downturn in the economy?
Honestly, one, I think he needs a reset on his economic team. I mean, it just brings someone in who may share his view of restoring manufacturing, may believe that you need smart strategic tariffs in certain places, but will assure everyone that you're not going to have blanket tariffs again. You're not going to be tariffing allies. Bring in new people on an economic team. Assure the country you're never going to do blanket tariffs again, that was a mistake, and that you're going to look at things sector by sector and not have these kind of policies. You
mean kick out Peter Navarro and Howard Lutnick, who are seen as the two people who are most in favor of tariffs? What are you suggesting, Ro?
Well, Lutnick would be a good first step. I mean, you know, Lutnick, I don't like picking on people, but he was on TV on Sunday saying that by having these tariffs, we're going to be doing more screwing and assembling of screws of the iPhone. And today, I'd love Howard Lutnick to come to my district because, look, the screws and the assemblies of screws are like 0.3% of the iPhone's cost. You have the display, you have RAM memory, you have the camera, and I know Lutnick loves 19th century policies, but he should understand 21st century production. So he'd be a great start. And putting someone, there are a lot of people, they're Republicans, but hey, Kernen would be good. I don't know, I'm sure Joe isn't for all these tariffs. And so bring someone in who's going to have some common sense.
Congressman, I don't think the administration is going to necessarily be listening to you or any Democrats. What do you hear in Congress from your Republican counterparts? How do they feel about all of this?
You know, Don Bacon has been terrific. He's a Republican from Nebraska. He and I serve on the Armed Services Committee together. He's bringing forth bipartisan legislation to reassert Congress's right over the tariffs. We already have a few Republicans on board. I think it's going to get Republican support. I mean, this is something that affects farmers. It affects small businesses that rely on inputs. It affects manufacturers because they need a lot of the products that are coming into the country to produce things. Those have gone up. So I think this is the first time, actually, I've seen Republicans criticize the president.
You have your own bill that you've brought forward. You're calling it the Drain the Swamp Act. It brings back White House ethics rules that were gotten rid of. It's an interesting point, but I can't imagine that's going anywhere in Congress, given the leadership structure right now.
Well, look, even some of the MAGA folks were for this, and it says that any president, not just this one, but going forward, that White House officials should not get gifts from lobbyists. It used to be the rule. There was an executive order that was repealed. Let's just make it permanent. No gifts from lobbyists to White House officials. But you know, right now, beyond that, I mean, obviously that's an issue of transparency. I just want an issue of competency. I don't care if they're Republicans. Just find people who've understood basic economics and understand that when you have blanket tariffs and start a trade war, that's bad for the United States and the global economy.
You're from California, Ro. I mean, I love you, but you know, preaching competence and great government and knowing what you're doing, knowing what you're doing economically, it's just rich. But that's my only comment. Just I don't know what you say about me, Ro. They might listen to me if I said it. But I did sort of say it about tariffs. I don't know why you don't just do deregulation, you know, keep taxes low, do DOGE, close the border. There's all these things. You'd be at 70%. Probably. I don't know. I'm not sure what the end game here is necessarily, Ro.
Well, Joe, I appreciate you calling balls and strikes on it, because, you know, even Reagan was very eloquent against these kind of blanket tariffs.
Right, I know.
And so, you know, and I think Musk is having doubts about it from some of his Twitter feed. But look, the reality is I share the president's goal, and I know you do, of building us into a manufacturing superpower, having advanced manufacturing. But you need to develop the workforce for that. You need government finance for that. That's how Silicon Valley was built. NASA said, if you build semiconductor chips, Intel, Fairchild will buy them. And he hasn't come with a comprehensive policy of how we're going to do this. Instead, he spooked all these manufacturers, and they are not investing in building new factories. If that's the goal, the policy isn't working.
The whole idea, Ro, that if you build it here, you won't be tariffed. What happens if we get to 0-0 with everyone? Then you don't need to build it here. I don't get it.
That's the other piece. Even if you have the 10% piece, it's not clear that you still build it here. Even if you have a across-the-board 10% piece.
Right.
If you're Tim Cook, I'm not sure if you have a choice between India and here that you necessarily go here, Ro. What do you say to that?
Well, this is why I think you need financing incentives that the CHIPS Act did. Look, China, and I don't think we should imitate them, but they're literally pouring trillions of dollars into industrial lending. And they're giving their companies money to go build new factories, new AI. It's not just the tariffs that are going to help our companies here. We've got to say, if you build it here, the government will buy it, at least in the beginning, to help it scale. We're going to help you finance. We're going to help you get the plumbers and electricians, the workforce that you need. We're going to help you get the technologists that you need.
But, Ro, the conundrum is there's a labor cost. It's not just the talent. Look, there's a skills issue, no question. But then there's just the labor cost unto itself, which is to say that at least for the foreseeable future, it will be cheaper to hire folks in India than it will be to hire folks in the U.S. The question is, what's the delta between those two? But I would argue to you, I would imagine, at least over the next decade, if not longer, 2 decades, that the delta will be high enough that if the marginal cost, even if you had a 10% tariff in place across the board, that you still might make the choice to effectively manufacture elsewhere and import.
Andrew, you're absolutely right about the delta on labor costs, but the one issue is productivity. I mean, labor is usually 7–10% of some of these high technology products and even the modern steel. And so if you have factories that have more robots, that have more automation, we can compete with productivity if they have financing. Now,
by the way, you're raising a very important point, Ro. Because the truth is, and I've heard a lot about this from technology leaders even in the past week, if in fact they do decide to manufacture more in the United States, it's not clear that it's going to necessarily help the job picture so much, because the truth is that most of it, or at least a lot of it, will be done by robots. And that's a whole separate matter to think about.
I think it's completely right. I don't think we can be dishonest to say somehow there's going to be this massive spike of manufacturing employment. But what it can do, if you even have 500 people in a factory as opposed to the 5,000 you used to, is bring wealth. And it can bring wealth into communities like Johnstown, Pennsylvania, Galesburg, Illinois, Warren, Ohio. Yes, you're not to have a 4,000-person plant, but now you have a 500-person plant, and people are looking after the machines. They're programming the machines. They're working if it breaks down. They're doing quality control. And we're bringing modern wealth and modern national security into the country. That would be a thoughtful thing. That's what I was hoping the president would do. I would have worked bipartisan to help on that, but blanket tariffs aren't the way to get there.
Congressman Khanna, thank you for your time.